The 10th of September 1961 was the date that marked Ireland's worst aviation disaster. This was President Airlines, an American charter aircraft travelling between Dusseldorf in Germany to transit through Shannon and onwards to Chicago in the United States. On that day, 83 people lost their lives, 77 passengers and 6 crew. To date, this is the worst aviation disaster ever to have taken place on Irish territory. Pat O'Connell, thank you very much for taking our call today. How are you?
You're welcome, Peter. I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you very much. We're, as you know, preparing the last sections of a standalone documentary on President Airlines, the 1961 crash. And from talking to you previously and from another radio interview you did, I think shortly before mine or after mine, I think your father was involved somehow in the crash. Is that correct?
He was indeed. He was one of the APOs, as they were called at that time, one of the airport firemen, and he would have been part of the rescue and recovery party that would have been sent out on the night.
Okay, but that wasn't that wasn't the only crash he was out to. Is that correct?
Oh God, no. I think in actual fact, himself and the crew members, his fellow crew members, I think were there for most of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way the ball bounced. My father would certainly have had a story to tell of 5, maybe 6.
Wow.
Of the crashes that were there.
Mm-hmm.
Of each area, but actually the presidential one was the one that stuck out in my mind as a young lad.
Yeah, and why was that, Pat? Was it the stories that your dad was relating to you?
Yeah. We were quite young at the time, because I was born shortly before that crash. Mm-hmm. And I suppose one of these things would be on their minds, the lads in the recovery in that situation. I suppose that's the thing that would have played on their minds for years. But I remember we pulled up outside a gate one particular day, up by, to me, which was only mud, but they were the mud flats on the river.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told that it was the Silver Strand. And
it's funny you mentioned that, Pat, because I was down there, I believe, at the very same gate, and don't laugh at this, I would have actually traversed the field except for a sign on the gate which said, beware of the bull, so I wasn't going there.
That ought to go on the side of caution, isn't it? Well, anyhow, as I remember the story that he told, he had told us that the plane had crashed into the river. Now, as a young lad, I couldn't understand what he was talking about, a river, because I couldn't see water. All I could see was the mud, with the sunlight glistening on it. But he explained to us that when the tide would come in, that the water would be there, and so on and so forth. But his poignant memory of that was that when they arrived on the scene and they got to the wreckage of the aircraft, that the first person that he attended on the night was an air hostess, and she was still alive. Now, I suppose the part that stands out the most is that I've been used to him talking about the other crashes, and indeed that one also, and talking about dismemberment and disfigurement and the horrific injuries that people would have suffered.
Mm-hmm.
And he spoke on this occasion about a girl, as he called her, that was perfectly presented. He had said on the night that as she lay on the ground on the mud, that she was an absolutely beautiful looking girl. And he knelt down and he began to talk to her, and he tried to assess her injuries. Very quickly he realised that she had a more severe injury to the back of her head.
Gosh.
That would not be consistent with sustaining life. He had described it as being as if the back of her head was cut clean off with a blade, and that you could see. He says you could see it was just brain matter that was in there. But despite that, she was compass mentis and spoke with him. Unfortunately, he never told us what their conversation was, but she did speak with him, and he said that she spoke very, very well. He understood her clearly, which suggests to me that even though she was one of the hostesses, from what I gather, most of the people on the aircraft that night would have been German or Austrian nationals, and
correct.
To have English at that time now might have been somewhat difficult. But it, as I said, she was definitely one of the air hostesses. But he spoke with her for a few moments, and he said he held her in his arms, and whatever way they spoke, anyhow. My father. I won't say that he was a religious man. He certainly took his religion seriously, but he was spiritual. Yeah. And it meant something to him on the night, I suppose, because he knew that the girl wasn't going to make it. He knew there was no hope for her with what he had seen, and he asked her to pray with him, and he said the act of contrition for her, and she repeated it for him. And he said, just at the end of the act of contrition, he said she just closed her eyes, and he said it was the very same as if she just fell asleep.
Gosh.
And she died in his arms.
The last time I spoke to you, Pat, was back in December when I did that original interview with Claire FM. And yes. Obviously by just laser focusing on President Airlines in the intervening months, I myself have come about through persistence, just coming across information that you might have not known before. I think the story of President Airlines is one of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The airline was not a good airline anyway. But what I discovered in relation to Erica is that she had an older sister by the name of Edith. Yeah. And Edith was married in the States in Long Island. And Erica, as far as I know, was living with her. It was to have been Erica's last flight, because the other aspect of the research is that her uncle was there on the flight with her. And she had got off the charter. There was a Cornell University charter on the ground. She swapped over to the westbound flight to be with her uncle. But back in Long Island, her sister was also quitting the airline business, right? And they knew it was somebody's last flight. They flipped a coin, and Erica got heads, so she went. Oh, it's unbelievable. God. Yeah, I know. And you can say the same thing about the other 82 people who died, and which is true. But it's particularly poignant when it just seems that Erica, for me, when I was doing the research, is kind of the lens or the focal point, and correctly identified by you. She was Austrian, but as I said, last flight, and she was to have gone into hotel management to study hotel management, to join. I think her uncle had a little bit of a hotel dynasty. He was going over to Canada hunting, by the way.
My God!
And they found his gun in the mud. So there you go.
Good Lord.
Just getting back to your dad for a second, Pat. Yes. I suppose it's the times we live in now versus the times back then. There was no there was no post-traumatic stress recognized.
No. Today, I suppose you've got critical incident stress management, and people in the front line, like our fire personnel today, our ambulance personnel, even Garda Síochána, and to a degree, believe it or not, some of our religious people that are exposed and called to these situations. I suppose we can't forget their little participation also, but they would be. Their mental health would be minded. Mm-hmm. Whereas that time there was nothing like that.
There was nothing for them.
No. Any bit of solace that time was, get up and get on with it, be a man about it, head off to work the following day.
And he was at work the following day, I presume,
Yeah, definitely. Now, I do remember my mother to speak on occasion, and in particular after my father had passed, and she did say that after some of the disasters there, and again she mentioned presidential in particular, probably because that was a very, very personal moment. If any of us have had to be with somebody in their last moments, it has a very, very, very profound effect upon the person that will share the last moments with somebody. But she said it wouldn't have been unusual around that time to find him taking moments on his own and going to the bedroom, and she'd find him inside there, and he'd be after having a good old cry for himself.
God almighty, yeah. It stays with you, isn't it? Obviously, it has to stay with you.
Oh God, it does. It does indeed. I'm reading a book at the moment by the journalist Fergal Keane.
Oh yes.
And Fergal, I think it's called The Madness, and Fergal was exposed to quite a lot of war atrocities and the physical damage that it done to the human being and man's inhumanity to his fellow man. But the trauma is the same, whether you see the trauma done by war or whether you see the trauma done by road injury, or whether it's airline or train, any of that. The human being is not supposed to be dismembered and torn apart. And he himself Fergal Keane himself has had many, many years of fighting post-traumatic stress disorder, and has written this book about it.
Yeah, I used to know Fergal from many moons ago. Our paths crossed a long time ago. There's one a newer aspect of the research that I've uncovered as well, and that was that the undertaker was Frank Thompson. And because of the state of President Airline's finances, he had one hell of a time trying to recover expenses because those bodies had to be because there was a lot of there was a lot of work in it. They had to be embalmed and shipped back to Germany, Austria, whatever, and the States. He had to enlist the help of Donnacha O'Malley, who was a former neighbour of mine on the North Circular Road in Limerick, to work with the Minister for Foreign Affairs to get the funds from President Airlines. And I think he got settled in the end, but it dragged on for months afterwards. It was horrendous. Lastly, there's, and I won't keep you much longer. There was a fisherman I had met in Askeaton whose father had gone across in a flatboat over to the wreckage because they could see the crash from the other side of the river, which, by the way, I originally thought it was the south side of the river. It wasn't. I thought Silver Strand was on the south. Not at all. It's just short of the main runway number 24. And this guy went out in the flatboat across the river with his mates. He was the guy who discovered the other lady. She was 28 years of age and she was German, and that was unfortunately the lady that was in the mud struggling to the bank. She made it to the bank, but her legs were gone below the knees. Okay, so she was the one Dr. Flynn worked on, and I think she died 3 hours later. They dosed her with morphine and blood transfusion surgery. She never made it. So 83 people gone in
well, I suppose it's a sign of how far we have come, in that at that time, at any time, obviously, the loss of a limb, and that particular girl had lost 2 limbs. Today, if got on time, it's salvageable. It's not easy, but a lot more things can be done. A lot more interventions can be done there and then on the spot, as opposed to what was there at that time. So it's only by all the learning from those
Crashes.
And I presume from speaking to the people that would have been involved, like my father and like the other lads, his crew members, that we are where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
That safety has become such a feature.
And the one critical piece of equipment that they could have used back in 1961, but that only arrived in Shannon in 2001, believe it or not, was a small hovercraft. Perfect.
Yeah.
There is a small hovercraft out there.
Yeah.
Pat, I won't keep you much longer because I know you're on the way to collect your wife, and you might pass on our good wishes to her. So for everything that you've done, and once again, thank you for the Pan American coffee pot. It's sitting resplendent on my bookcase. It found a good home. So Pat, have a nice weekend, and we'll talk to you and Anne soon. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Cheerio. Thanks, Pat. Okay.
Bye bye now.
Okay. Bye now.
Cheers.
My journey with President Airlines ends in this graveyard. None of the victims of President Airlines are interred here in this graveyard. Most of them were transported back to their homes, Austria, Germany, and the United States. As time passes with my research, for some reason, the flight attendant, Erica Urban, I think speaks for the other 82 victims of this disaster. She was very young, 22 years of age. She had her full life ahead of her. She was making her final flight and was to have gone on afterwards to study hotel management in Austria and joined forces with her uncle, who was also lost in the flight, a prominent hotelier in Austria with several hotels behind his name. Erica loved coming to Ireland. The only photograph I've got of Erica is a very, very grainy, small image I found in a newspaper archive, and in it she is standing outside one of the hostels, the wooden hostels, which is now, I think, nearly all gone, but they were located close to the site of the modern control tower. During the filming of this documentary, I had cause to come up into this area here to find the exact location of Silverstrand / Barley Harbour, which I did find in the end. As I drove along the narrow lanes, I came across a gentleman, an elderly man, who by sheer coincidence, and it does seem very strange, was the refueler of President Airlines Theodore Roosevelt on the night. And his story was extremely interesting. He didn't want to appear in this documentary, so I have to respect that. But he often, during the conversation, made reference to flight attendants from the various airlines, President included, walking around the perimeter of the airport in those days and coming down here for a walk, and he'd often engage in conversation with them. Erica loved Ireland. She loved coming here. And in particular, she had a soft spot for the Killaloe area. And maybe it was the water sports. She really liked water skiing. Maybe it was this that reminded her of the lakes in her home of Austria.